All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Vantage's Real Talks. If you haven't joined us before, Vantage Ventures is an amplifier of scalable startups in West Virginia, and we're using this Real Talk series to chat with a bunch of exceptional individuals about their why and also how they got to where they are. We're obsessed with entrepreneurs, and so we spend a lot of time learning about what drives them and the unique stories that have helped them succeed. Today, I'm super excited to be talking with James. He's a co-founder of Iconic Air. We're lucky enough to have those guys be part of the Vantage squad. And I'm really excited to chat with you all. You've really kind of run the gamut from being undergrads at WVU in engineering, graduating, building this company that's really kind of taking off and blooming. So I'd love to talk to you more about that, but thanks for jumping on here today.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. Excited to be on here and talk about our journey.
Yeah. So maybe really quickly, I'm going to ask about, obviously, we're in Morgantown and love WVU, and I want to hear about your all's journey and how Iconic Air came to be. But do you mind giving a quick rundown of what Iconic Air is focused on right now and what you all are doing?
For sure. So kind of the simple one-liner is we're a platform for the next generation of emissions detection and leak compliance. And for most people or anyone listening, that probably doesn't mean too much to them, but basically within the oil and gas industry, there's a lot of reporting and compliance that they have to do. And over the past several years, the government has actually invested billions into research for new ways of monitoring emissions and compliance. And so now that oil and gas industry, high emitting industries are starting to use these new types of hardware that have come out, we want to be the platform and the software that basically collects all this data, analyzes it, and then provides value to their business and operations.
Nice. Okay. So that's pretty well formed. You guys are young and haven't even been, like, Iconic's not that old in the scheme of things. But you all are doing really well with this, right? So you were able to get a phase 1 SBIR?
Yep, phase 1 SBIR, STTR through the AFWorks program with the Air Force. And we just submitted our application last month for phase 2, and hopefully next month we'll have some good news on that. So we're definitely excited about the opportunities around the AFWorks program.
Yeah. And what is that? Because we were a couple weeks ago, I was chatting with Brian, who's from Wheeling and has Touchstone Labs up north, which I know you've got some roots up north too. And he's really experienced a ton of success in terms of leveraging SBRs and STTRs, and then being able to use that funding to really ramp up and spin out companies into the private sector. How much with your all's SBR, STTR, like, what does that look like in terms of how hard is it to get a phase 1? What does it mean that you're now looking at a phase 2? Is it a ton of money? Is it not a lot?
For sure, yeah. So just to jump into the mechanics of it, the phase 1 is almost like the low-hanging fruit. So there's not as much maybe criteria or specifics to it. Typically, at least with the AFWorks program, the phase 1 is actually more focused on figuring out how the current technology we've developed can serve as like a dual use case, dual purpose within the Air Force. And that's usually around a 3-month contract. And I believe for the AFWorks program, it's $50K. So we got $50K for that phase 1. You go through the phase 1, talk with all the leadership within the Air Force. Kyle and George and people on the team basically just spent weeks on weeks trying to talk with them to figure out, okay, what we've built so far for the oil and gas industry, how can we leverage this within the Air Force and help them with some of the problems they have around emissions or industrial hygiene. Luckily, we found that person, that position of leadership that was interested in it, like the dual use case, which was why we were able to successfully submit a phase 2. And then the phase 2 can be anywhere from $500,000 and upward, depending on some of the matching programs. So
nice. So it's pretty serious. Yeah, that's great. And so let's talk about how you got here, because when did you graduate?
Just graduated about 8 or 9 months ago, so December of 2019. So still less than a year from graduation, which is kind of wild. It's gone fast.
Yeah, that's totally wild. Had you all started? I mean, I imagine it wasn't a start after graduation and get to the point where now you're talking to the Air Force about a contract that could mean $500,000.
For sure. No, it's honestly been close to probably almost a 2-year journey now with Kyle and myself. Kyle and I knew each other before we actually started this venture and started working together on business. And so since then it's just been a slow, steady pace of just staying committed to the process and trying to build a sustainable company.
Yeah. So how did you and Kyle meet?
So Kyle and I met actually at like a networking event. I think it was like my sophomore or junior year. And at the time I was kind of really deep in like 3D printing. I had a cell phone repair business I was working on the side. And then Kyle had been working on a YouTube channel where he talked a lot about engineering. And we met at that networking event and he was like, hey man, like I think some of the stuff you're working on is pretty cool. And then he actually invited me onto his YouTube channel and we did kind of like a podcast. It's still up. It's pretty funny. We joke about that all the time still, just looking back on it. And since then we've worked on a couple projects together after that. And then after kind of knowing each other for about a year, we ended up deciding to enter the West Virginia business plan competition back in, I think it was now like going into the end of 2018, 2019 was when we first kind of formed the business. And since then it's just been nothing but upwards, luckily. So
yeah. So y'all are in school and both studying engineering?
Yeah, both industrial engineering. Yep. Okay,
so you meet and on the YouTube channel are like throwing a bunch of ideas around. Like I'm imagining, are you all just like throwing anything out there, like anything goes, all kinds of ideas, and you just knew you wanted to work together, or was there specific stuff?
Yeah, it was a little bit more around like we talked a lot about the 3D printing. I had I think 1 or 2 3D printers in my garage at the time. So we talked a lot about what I was doing with that. We talked about cryptocurrency, just like anything that we thought was interesting in tech back then at the time. And we just kind of chatted about it. And I think it ended up being like close to an hour. And it was just, similar to this, right? Just having some coffee or something, sitting in a garage or a room and just chatting about cool things.
Yeah, totally. And then what was the first thing? So you said you all decided to enter the West Virginia business plan competition. It sounds like that was kind of the first like marker that really brought some official thoughts together. What was that? So I imagine it wasn't the exact same company you're looking at today.
Nope, you're exactly right. So our business today is called Iconic Air. Back then, our first idea was actually called Iconic EDU, and we were focused on honestly similar aspects of emissions and stuff that we were working on now, but just from more of a educational perspective. So we're both from West Virginia. We both wanted to kind of, as a project, help put together almost like a drone STEM kit that would be able to help students learn more about STEM in West Virginia and kind of promote that theme. And one of the pieces of that was actually having them use a small sensor and collecting air quality, or technically emissions data around their school. And then since then, it's evolved and spun out to obviously this completely different commercial use case, just through a lot of conversations with people and traveling around to different states, even a couple countries, and just talking to people about their problems, within the kind of emissions space. So kind of crazy to see how we went from, this to that. But I mean, like you said, every business at some point, or every entrepreneur has this kind of slow journey where they slowly evolve, and then eventually they land on this one thing where like, okay, this is where we want to kind of stick. This is where we want to build and kind of try to push for that sustainable business.
Yeah. So tell me more about that process, because that is you're starting with these kits and wanting to get them in schools around West Virginia, your, 3D printing experience and kind of leveraging all of these ideas. And then, you said you traveled a bunch and we're finding out, how does that actually happen? Like, what did the process look like of turning and trying out different ideas to then find where you're now kind of at a sticking point?
So just the starting point of it was we just wanted to build something. And at the time I happened to be into the 3D printing and kind of making, side of things. And Kyle was into video YouTube. So that was where like, okay, well, let's try to build a kit where we'll leverage some of the stuff that I've been working on, and then we'll do the videos and stuff with Kyle's background to create this product. We started there, and then really it was just every single week or month, we just kept talking to as many people as possible. We talked with professors at the university. We'd talk with other engineering students. We'd try to talk with, like a good example is a group, Accelerate out of Pittsburgh. We went up there and just asked them if we could, drop in and just pitch them on what we were working on. We did every single pitch competition at the Launch Lab, and I honestly think every single competition we pitched over the course of like 3 months, our business changed like a small tad, and it just kept evolving and evolving. And so really, honestly, we evolved and changed really because of the feedback from people who had done this before, people who had a unique perspective on what we were working on. So we definitely wouldn't be, the model and business model we have today if it wasn't for kind of just always talking with folks about what we're working on or how it can be better, or how it can evolve more.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing to hear, because it's, I think so often, you hear people say that, you can't possibly know what that final product is going to be or that final business. And it sounds like, especially like for you guys, like it could have really hurt you if you stayed super tied to this initial idea. And like, it sounds like you've gotten really comfortable with the idea of moving and changing ideas based on input and things like that. Did you, and I guess, so you said professors, other engineering students, who else were you all talking to, or how were you getting connected? Like, are you just literally finding people on LinkedIn? Like, how were you getting conversations with people, and what kinds of people were you trying to talk with over the last year?
For sure. So at first it started off with us just trying to leverage, campus resources, talking with folks at the Launch Lab. They were a huge help in everything that we've been able to do. And then obviously with you guys at Advantage opening up, as soon as we heard about that, we're like, okay, we got to talk to these people and try to get involved. So really first off, just looking into the university of like, okay, what resources are available to us? Who can we talk to that can give us feedback or put us in touch with someone that will give us feedback or maybe give us an intro to a company or something like that. And that network's just slowly trickled over time now, where we've talked with different alumni. We've talked with a ton of different accelerators, mentors within, now the oil and gas industry. And it's honestly just a network effect. Everyone knows somebody. And really just from that initial kind of hard push we made when we first started, just talking to as many people as we could about what we were doing, it's just slowly evolved. And now we have a very deep network, honestly, of people that we can kind of bounce things off of or get their input.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I like commend you guys on that, because that can be pretty intimidating to like not have necessarily, to kind of be starting with just an idea of here are our skill sets and we're kind of thinking this, and putting yourself out there. It can be pretty tough to make that first, like you said, that first big push of just tell everyone and see what everyone has to say. But it sounds like now it sounds like you think you're at a bit of a sticking point, like you've kind of found this place that you want to focus on and really move forward. How do you think about or balance, like, when's the right time to stop? You could probably pivot forever. You could probably just constantly be changing. How do you decide, okay, this is what we're going to do?
For sure. That's a great question, and honestly a tough question. I'm sure every entrepreneur or founder has probably their own unique story to this, but I think for us, it was when we found a balance of traction with what we had actually built, and then also the resources that we had, at the time. So once we kind of consolidated, I would say the AFWorks program was a big part of that too, where we had kind of consolidated some funding through non-dilutive, sources, whether it's grants or competitions, where we were pitching this idea, and it seemed like, okay, this is actually kind of sticking with people. Like, they see a very large potential in this. And then once we realized that big vision was there, it was, okay, how do we build the groundwork from this? Like, in terms of the software and the product, what do we need to build? What do we need to get in front of people? And then we just kept on putting that in front of as many people as possible. And it was almost this confirmation where over time we had several different groups in the industry saying, okay, like this is legit. Like, this is something that would actually help us in what we do. And it truly actually is starting to feel like we're solving that major pain for someone, which at the end of the day, that's number one goal of an entrepreneur is, what pain are we solving for the end user? And once we started to feel that, I think that was really when we first started to dial in, like, okay, this is probably a good lane that we're in to try to build this out and scale it.
Yeah. So can you talk a little more about that? Like, what is that? So now you've, somewhat landed within oil and gas and have been talking to all these folks saying, yeah, we need this. So what is it exactly, like that pain point that you all are solving, and kind of where the industry's really needing this platform you all are building?
For sure. So a big push that's going on in industry right now is just kind of a term, ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. And really what we've seen, and I mean, we're very young, but we've talked with a lot of people who've seen it over the course of the past decade, is this transition of companies now reporting, on their quarterly reports to shareholders or just on their bottom line, new environmental based metrics that actually affect their business and operations. And so something that they didn't have to do before because they weren't reporting on this is actually aggregate a lot of this data, slice it and dice it in different ways to have different insights that they can use it for. And so that's where we kind of come in, is we look to basically be the first step after a company has collected their emissions data. So as soon as they collect the emissions data, then they essentially upload or drop all of their data, whether it's pictures, CSV files, whatever it is, any type of emissions data into our platform. And then we handle all the magic of getting it in the right format, getting the analysis done to where it gives them these outputs that they can then use, to make the business decisions around some of these ESG metrics. So the pain itself is actually really the fact that they didn't have a system to actually handle or process this data. And most of the people we still talk to are actually doing something manual in Excel. They have this master spreadsheet going across their whole organization, or maybe they're dropping files in Google Drive or something, very like siloed off, localized data. And we look to basically, aggregate all that and then be able to find new insights and stuff from it.
Cool. So you're really seeing companies, react to these like new reporting structures and start to be willing to invest some money kind of in this area of a whole new level of analysis. And so you all are really feeling like there's opportunity there.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of the folks, within oil and gas and even outside of oil and gas, pretty much every major corporation now has some sort of pretty large sustainability or energy transition team or group of people. And that, that's their sole mission now is, okay, how can we either reduce our company's carbon footprint, or how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions or the intensity of those emissions? And so they're really starting to track these things now. And a lot of these groups also have pretty big budgets. So it's just a good fit overall with kind of what we're building towards.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, I'm going to kind of change topic for a minute and ask, you all are super, getting a lot of success and traction and starting to have these larger conversations with companies in oil and gas, with, the government on different things the Air Force may need. What does your all's team look like? So you said it's you and Kyle are co-founders. And what has your team looked like, I guess, from the beginning to now, and how you kind of manage that and think about it being so young?
For sure. So, Kyle and I originally started it. So while we were still in school, pretty much any time we had outside of doing anything school related or whatever, we were staying up late or traveling or doing something for it. So Kyle and I kind of tried to build that initial vision. And the really cool thing is that, as we started to get that traction, like become a finalist in the West Virginia Business Plan competition and get into some of these bigger national competitions where we were traveling, a lot of our close friends and other, honestly, I think maybe they're all other engineers. I think all of them are engineers except for maybe one. But they all just were like, this is cool. Like they wanted to be involved. And it wasn't like from a mindset of like, oh, well, what is in it for me? They were just like, no, like this is cool. You guys are like getting all this awesome opportunity. Like, how can we help? How can we be involved? And really, that's just been our journey since. So, I mean, even now, myself, Kyle, and our other teammate, George, who actually just graduated from his MBA program last May, we're the only 3 full-time on it. So we're full-time, always down at Vantage, as you could guess. And then we have 3 other part-time people who do software development. So we have technically a team of 6, but split in half with, 3 part-time, 3 full-time. And to the second half of the question, looking forward, I think that the biggest thing we've tried to focus on is understanding, maybe where we lack our core competencies as a team. So something that Kyle and I have really been talking about for several months now is we realize and acknowledge that, neither of us are oil and gas experts. None of the other guys are oil and gas experts, right? But we're in the oil and gas industry. And so we've formed several partnerships with people who are in the oil and gas industry and are the experts, so that when we're pitching investors or talking with folks, we can actually have that validity piece of like, okay, we do have the technology side, but we also have the oil and gas side. And so I think that's been a huge help and honestly a true part of the success as we've continued to move forward.
Do you ever wake up and just feel like overwhelmed by I mean, you've just listed, you've graduated and you're building this company. You've got like someone, George, who's full time, and other team members kind of pitching in on this and getting involved. Does it ever just feel like, oh my God, I don't even know what are we doing, and how do you, I guess, stay motivated and driven and confident that you can kind of keep moving forward?
I think it just comes down to the people you start this thing with. I think we're just blessed with a good group of folks who, like, we're all pushing for the same goal. So maybe if one of us is kind of maybe like, oh, well, it's a little slower today, or maybe we found out we didn't get that investment or we didn't get into that competition, maybe one or two of us are down. It's like, man, shucks, like, what are we doing? There's always someone else there. There's always another person in our group that's like, come on, let's keep pushing forward. We have this next deadline and this next deadline. And I think that's really just been instrumental to our success, is that there's always a couple of us that are just able to pick each other up if one of us are down or maybe just frustrated with something, or frustrated that we're not seeing maybe a specific result we wanted. I think really that's the key. It's just people that are willing to push forward together, really no matter the cost. I mean, Kyle and I both turned down, full-time engineering jobs coming out of college. And so I think that going through that process together and kind of going against maybe the typical grain really kind of just like consolidated our vision and our push to like really try to see this thing through and truly scale it out.
Yeah. Who are some, so now or earlier in your all's process, like role models, whether it was other West Virginia companies or companies elsewhere? What were some sources of like inspiration for you all?
I think it was honestly just talking with other founders. I mean, I could name a couple specific people, but really just at a high level, other people who were farther than us in the process. So maybe they had already raised a Series A investment round, or maybe they had already had a successful exit. Just talking with people who have done it before and realizing that, there is this path that you have to follow. It's a process, right? And to your point earlier, if you can't really get caught up on the idea you're working on, it's more about being in love with the process of being an entrepreneur and problem solving and building a business. And so hearing that story from other founders who were further ahead of us definitely has been instrumental, in how we look at the way that we move forward and that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna flip that back on you, because like you said, you guys are at Vantage all the time and it's awesome. Shameless plug. But we love having them in our cool co-working space. But and you all really have, shown a lot of commitment to be that kind of mentor and inspiration for other kind of up and coming founders in the area. How do you think about your role in that and kind of your all's, commitment and attachment to West Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for both, Kyle and myself on this, because him and I have talked a lot about this and a lot about how we view that. We're both born and raised in West Virginia, both Northern Panhandle folks, myself, Weirton, Kyle, Wheeling. And I think we feel it on our shoulders. Like, we feel a responsibility to be part of that group, to be part of the group of people that are trying to, come alongside groups like Vantage to build this, innovative ecosystem in West Virginia, this startup based ecosystem in West Virginia. And there's definitely, as you know, there's a huge push for it right now. And we're just trying to do our part in it. If that means we show up to a class and we talk to a group of freshmen or sophomore about, hey, this is where we were, this was our journey, or if it's going and talking to MBA folks about how maybe they can turn their idea into something that when they come out of their MBA, they can try to pitch investors or get money for it. Just, in any way that we can help, we always try to be involved with that. And we're super bought into West Virginia and building the ecosystem here. And we're honestly really thrilled and excited to be able to be part of, a lot of the awesome stuff going on here.
Yeah, it's awesome. It really feels like talking to people, there's kind of this unique intensity of like love for West Virginia, folks who are from here, maybe they've moved away and come back, maybe, they've kind of gone through, Marshall or WVU and have decided to build something here. It's like this larger network that ends up really focusing back on what's going on in the state and that desire to give back. It's kind of amazing to hear that when you all are really heads down and moving quickly at these transitional times for your business, you're still you're already thinking about how do we pitch in and help younger people see themselves as founders and entrepreneurs. Do you think you're biased that to the engineering department at WVU, or do you spread around your all's resources evenly?
No, I don't think so. We spread around. We just, anywhere we're asked to show up, we try to show up and talk about our journey, talk about our story. Because it was, I mean, it was everyone on campus. It was groups from engineering, groups from B&E, like all health sciences. I mean, literally at some point in our journey, literally multiple people from every aspect of the campus resources has been literally crucial to us, getting into a competition or giving us that review on a pitch deck. So, in any way that we can help out, we always try to.
Cool. All right. Well, we like to let people ask some questions as well. So I'll also shout it out. If y'all are watching, feel free to put questions in the comments and we'll try to get to them in person on here, or if not, can circle back after the talk is done. But one person asked that they were really interested in your thinking on how to reach product market fit. And how are you all thinking about entering adjacent markets?
That's a great question. So in terms of the product market fit, really the only way that we've been able to even validate that or think we have even the slightest bit of product market fit, because being able to say a full product market fit is like, okay, well, like that's every startup's dream, is having a solid product market fit. For us, it was solely just customer discovery and talking to users. So every time we would have an initial, hypothesis of like, okay, we think this is the major pain that we're solving for someone, or this is the value proposition that we're bringing to them, we wouldn't just assume that was right. If anything, we would assume it was wrong until we talked with people and actually heard what their kind of raw opinion was on their actual problems. And then when multiple times that repeated process happens and you're talking to different folks in different parts of the country and different ecosystems, but they still have that similar pain, then that's when you can finally start to think, okay, there's probably something here. And then you can take it kind of a step further in a deep dive. In terms of the kind of tackling adjacent markets, it ties right back into that as well. So as originally when we're targeting customer discovery, we're just trying to talk to anyone, honestly, that will talk to us, whether it's in chemical refineries, oil and gas, like anything that was anywhere near, Air Force is another great group, right? Like anywhere that was near anything we were working on, we try to talk to them and then figure out kind of which group maybe had the biggest pain of them all. And for us, that ended up being oil and gas. And so that's why they're kind of our beachhead market and kind of our first kind of group that we're really pushing to bring this product to. And then from there, the adjacent markets kind of spin up, where based off previous customer discovery and talking with folks, you realize, hey, there is this opportunity in this other market. And after we kind of get this initial product out, then we can add this on to kind of meet those needs.
Yeah. Are there any adjacent markets that you all are thinking about, or are you just super focused right now and not even trying to look too many directions?
I think in terms of just the actual building of the product, we're super focused. But in terms of the long-term vision and what we can do, this ESG, conversation and sustainability push that's happening across almost every single industry in some capacity is something that we're super interested in. And another thing that, as an example of adjacent market is how can we leverage a lot of this data that we're collecting from an emissions standpoint and turn it into data sets or useful, groups of data for, financial markets. It's just literally one example. So we're always talking with folks who have that bigger picture mindset and are thinking about that. And we're always envisioning that, but then, at a product level, we're very super focused right now on that beachhead market. It's like kind of a weird balance, honestly. Because you have to have both, right? You don't want to build a product at the end of the day for just one group and then it's a super small market and no one else can benefit or use it, but you do want to expand and kind of grow as you scale up as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another has asked, what do you believe will motivate startups to move or stay in West Virginia?
So in terms of staying in West Virginia, I think that's a pretty easy sell. All you have to do is walk into the Vantage Ventures office space and be like, wow, I would love to be in this office space. Like, it's that cool. But no, honestly, there's so many, to stay in West Virginia, there's so many cool things going on. Like, even as just one example, when we got our AFWorks, award, there's a program that in West Virginia where the government will actually match a certain amount of funds that you get from getting one of those awards, right? So there's a lot of cool initiatives and things like that are going on in West Virginia, to where like it doesn't make sense to try to leave and go live somewhere that's more expensive, where you don't know as many people or don't have as strong of a network. And so I think staying in West Virginia, definitely, there's just a lot going on here. It kind of makes sense. Coming to West Virginia, it's almost a similar argument. I mean, if you think about, like, we have a couple, founders that are friends that live in San Fran or New York, and in terms of their burn rate versus ours, it's like 4 or 5 times the amount, just because of cost of living, office space, the market rate for salaries. So it's kind of cool with West Virginia because you get the opportunity to still have all these great resources that are being pushed and these initiatives that are forming, but then you have a super kind of low cost of living area. And if you're anywhere near an outdoors person, right, you have a ton of awesome things to do. I mean, it's a beautiful state, as we all know, being West Virginians. And I think once people come from the outside and see that, and they see all the cool tech stuff that's going on, it's just almost like a perfect match.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, what do you ever have time to do anything but work on your startup? Do you have any outside hobbies or things that you're able to make use of being in West Virginia?
Yeah, my 2 recent things have been like doing a lot of running. So I'll run, for anyone in Morgantown, the rail trail. That's where I usually do a lot of my running. It's honestly a good way to just, if it's been a long day of coding or meetings, it's a good way to just get out and get that fresh air and get down by the river. And then actually a couple of weeks ago, for the first time, I went whitewater rafting. So I think that may have triggered a new interest and passion in kind of the water sports arena. So
oh my gosh,
definitely
nice.
leveraging those beautiful West Virginia resources.
Yeah. Where did you go whitewater rafting?
Ohio Pile.
Nice. All right. There, people are asking questions.
Technically isn't in West Virginia, but it's close. And I actually have heard a lot about the Cheat River, so I'm pretty pumped about hopefully getting to do the Cheat River sometime soon.
Yeah. There's a lot of really cool. There's Cheat River, and then I actually also just did some of my first time whitewater rafting, like last year and this year, down in the New River Gorge, which is spectacular. And everyone's like, I can't believe you can drive to that. Like, we travel across the country to see that. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, they all right. The comment questions are bringing us back on track. But someone asked, how do you think the push towards renewable energy will affect your business? Do you guys have some ways you can intersect with those areas of energy as well?
Yes, I mean, renewable energy is definitely right up our alley. I think it's still kind of towards that large sustainability push, and that's really something that we're trying to better understand as we're collecting all these new types of data, is how can we turn it into these metrics that will be used to maybe help the energy transition and kind of the renewable energy. We don't have anything specific, like we're not working anything specifically with, say like solar panels or something like that. But in terms of just understanding how we can make that push towards sustainability, that's really what we're in the phase of now, is after we have collected a lot of this data, how can we use it to help kind of make that push?
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Well, before we wrap up, I'm going to ask, what advice do you have, or would you have for anybody who might be watching? Maybe they're thinking about an idea or haven't said it out loud. Maybe like they're just aspiring to be in the startup world one day. What would you say to them?
I'd say kind of like 3, I guess it's like 3 pillars, honestly. This is just kind of came to my mind on the fly, but I think the first one is really just staying patient. So like, as we talked about earlier, right, it's easy to get in the process and then constantly pivot and maybe wonder like, okay, is what we pivoted to actually worth pursuing or worth going after? But if you just stay patient and kind of really truly ingrain and enjoy the process, you're at some point, just it's a function of time. You're bound to, because you're so persistent, something is going to stick, and then you'll know, and then you make that push. The second I would say is just always talk to users, and not just people who maybe would be your end user or customer, but even, like I said earlier, just people who can maybe give you advice, or maybe it's a professor, or maybe it's like someone like you guys at Vantage, right, where they can just kind of bounce stuff off of. So just get out there and talk to as many people as you can about your idea. And then the third one is really just always keep building. It's part of the pivot process. There's really no point where you just land on one thing. You're like, okay, this is it, we're done, right? You are literally always making, adjustments and updates to, your platform, whether it's a software product, whether it's a hardware product, no matter what your business is, you're always making updates to it. So just always build.
Cool. Well, those are a great 3 pillars on the fly. That's yeah, appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today, and wishing you all the best. See you in the office, maybe someday soon.
For sure. Thanks again. And if anyone ever wants to chat with Kyle or myself about our process, our journey, we're on LinkedIn, or reach out to one of the Vantage folks. We're always more than happy to talk to anyone about their journey.
Sweet. Awesome. Have a good one, James.
You too. See you, Kelsey.